I joined yoga to relax, but she noticed my stiffness in more ways than one. The first time I walked into the studio, I wasn't sure what I expected. I'd read somewhere that yoga could untangle more than just muscles, but I had no idea how literal that could feel. The room smelled faintly of lavender and cedarwood, sunlight filtering softly through tall windows, dust motes dancing lazily in the warm beams. It was serene, almost too serene for someone as tense as me. She was there, naturally commanding without trying. Mid-stretch, her body curved gracefully, yet effortlessly, a blend of strength and ease I couldn't ignore. I immediately noticed her confidence, not the flashy kind, but quiet, refined, the kind that seems to belong to someone who knows themselves deeply. She was perhaps a decade or more older than me, but that only seemed to amplify her presence, the way experience lent her an aura of calm authority. "Ah," she said, eyes flicking toward me as I struggled to unroll my mat. "You're a little stiff, aren't you?" There was a playful lilt in her voice, a teasing undertone that made my chest tighten slightly. My cheeks warmed. I wanted to respond wittily, to brush it off, but all I could do was nod, feeling strangely exposed under her perceptive gaze. She moved closer, adjusting my mat with a touch that lingered just enough to make me acutely aware of her proximity. Her fingers brushed my elbow lightly, correcting my posture. It was professional, of course, yet something about it sent a shiver down my spine, a spark I didn't quite understand. The class began, and every movement I made seemed both inadequate and amplified in the quiet studio. I noticed the subtle grace of her gestures, the way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, the soft inhale before a stretch, the gentle smile she gave when I wobbled. It was impossible not to notice her attention. She had this way of looking that made you feel seen, not judged, yet profoundly vulnerable. By the end of the session, I was exhausted, physically and mentally, yet there was a lingering warmth that had nothing to do with the yoga itself. I rolled up my mat, but the memory of her steady gaze and the brief touch on my arm stayed with me, igniting a curiosity that was more than just about yoga. That first encounter wasn't earth-shattering, not in any dramatic sense. But something subtle had shifted, an unspoken awareness, a quiet tension that promised more than mere instruction. And for the first time in weeks, I found myself hoping the next class would come sooner rather than later. By the second class, I was already looking forward to her presence. It wasn't just the yoga anymore, it was the way she moved through the studio with calm authority, the quiet confidence in every step, the effortless way she adjusted the students around her. And, yes, it was the way she noticed me, even among the small group, as if she could see every stiff muscle and hesitant movement I made. "Try to relax your shoulders," she said softly, stepping closer. Her hand brushed mine as she guided my arms into position. It was brief, professional, and yet it lingered in a way that made my skin tingle. I tried to focus on my breathing, but I couldn't help noticing the warmth radiating from her touch, the subtle scent of her perfume, a soft vanilla mixed with the faint earthiness of the studio. I had never felt anything like it in a yoga class, or anywhere else, and it left me both distracted and oddly exhilarated. She moved beside me to correct my posture again. Her fingers pressed gently against the tension in my back, her eyes meeting mine with a patience that felt almost intimate. There was no rush, no judgment, only presence. It was intoxicating in its quiet simplicity. I realized I was hyper-aware of everything about her, the slight tilt of her head when she smiled, the soft cadence of her instructions, the rhythm of her breath as she demonstrated a stretch. Every movement seemed deliberate, graceful, and somehow attuned to me. During the poses, she would occasionally lean just slightly closer to adjust an arm or a leg. Each time, a wave of awareness passed through me. My muscles weren't the only thing tightening, my thoughts, my heart, even the small corners of my mind were pulled toward her. And yet, nothing was forced. Nothing crossed a line. Every touch, every gesture, carried the weight of professional care but hinted at something unspoken, a quiet connection that went beyond teacher and student. By the end of the class, sweat cooled on my skin, and I felt exhausted in that satisfying way only a challenging session can leave you. But there was something more, an awareness of her presence that lingered like a soft echo in my chest. I packed up my mats slowly, reluctant to leave the warmth of the studio, reluctant to leave her. The fleeting touches, the shared smiles, the quiet attentiveness, it all stayed with me, embedding a subtle longing I hadn't expected. I left the studio that day feeling stretched in more ways than one, not just physically but emotionally, as if a thread had quietly been woven between us, delicate yet unmistakable. And for the first time, I noticed that my anticipation for the next session wasn't just about yoga, it was about her. A few sessions in, I realized yoga wasn't the only thing stretching me. The instructor, her, had a way of noticing not just my body, but the way I carried myself, the tension in my shoulders, the hesitancy in my movements, even the little signs of frustration I tried to hide. One afternoon, during a particularly difficult pose, I faltered, wobbling and nearly losing my balance. My face heated with embarrassment. She moved to my side without a word, her presence calm and grounding. Kneeling beside me, she guided my arms gently, her hands warm and steady. "It's okay," she murmured, her voice soft and unhurried. There was no judgment, only patience and encouragement. Her gaze met mine, and for a fleeting moment, the rest of the world dissolved. I felt exposed, yes, but in a strangely comforting way, as if she could see both my stiffness and my insecurities, and still find me worth her attention. Her hand lingered on my shoulder just long enough for me to feel the steady warmth of her skin. I felt my muscles respond, relaxing under her guidance, and a quiet awareness sparked between us. It wasn't just about adjusting my posture, it was about the unspoken care in her touch, the way she seemed to intuit my needs without being intrusive. I realized I was hyper-aware of her every movement, the graceful arch of her back, the gentle sway as she demonstrated a pose, the calm inhale before each stretch. When she smiled, just a soft, knowing curve of her lips, it sent a subtle thrill through me. I caught myself lingering in the moment, studying her expression, the way she held herself with quiet confidence yet approachable warmth. My focus wavered, not from the difficulty of the pose, but from the closeness of her presence. Each subtle touch, each guiding hand, carried an emotional weight I hadn't anticipated. By the end of the session, my body was pleasantly sore, but it was my mind and heart that felt the most stretched. There was an intimacy forming, not romantic in the overt sense, but something deeper, an emotional tether woven through shared effort and attention. I left the studio feeling light and restless all at once, thinking about the way her hand had lingered, the quiet steadiness of her gaze, the calm confidence that seemed to radiate from her. For the first time, yoga felt like more than exercise. It was a space where vulnerability could exist safely, and where someone unexpected, made me feel both seen and strangely desired. The quiet tension between us was growing, subtle yet undeniable, and I couldn't stop anticipating the next session, wondering what it might reveal about her, and about myself. By the fourth session, the atmosphere in the studio had shifted for me, subtly, almost imperceptibly, but I could feel it in every glance, every slight brush of skin. She began to tease me lightly, a playful smirk tugging at the corners of her lips whenever I struggled with a pose. "Still a little stiff, aren't you?" she said one afternoon, and the soft laugh that followed carried warmth, amusement, and something I couldn't quite name. My cheeks flushed, and I found myself smiling back, caught off guard by the intimacy of the moment. Her teasing wasn't overbearing. It was gentle, affectionate, and carried the weight of someone who knew exactly how to draw you out without pressuring you. Each correction, each suggestion, came with a brush of her hand, the briefest contact that lingered in memory long after the session ended. When she adjusted my arm or guided my balance, her fingers pressed against my skin just enough to awaken a heightened awareness of every subtle touch. The playfulness extended to our little exchanges. I'd fumble through a pose, and she'd shake her head with exaggerated disappointment, a teasing glint in her eye, and I'd laugh despite myself. Somehow, the yoga studio became more than just a place to stretch, it became a stage for this quiet dance of attention and subtle attraction. The tension between us grew with each session, unspoken yet tangible, a slow pull that neither of us could, or wanted to, ignore. Even mundane moments carried weight. Passing a yoga block, our fingers would graze, and I'd feel the warmth of her skin, the faint perfume lingering in the air between us. A casual laugh over a shared struggle in a difficult pose would leave a flutter in my chest, my heart beating just a little faster. She would glance at me as she moved through the room, and I found myself holding her gaze longer than necessary, noticing the way her expression softened in moments of genuine amusement. And yet, everything remained appropriate, professional, and entirely within the bounds of her role. That was what made it all the more electric, the playful teasing, the lingering touches, the shared laughter, it all existed on a fine edge between professionalism and something far more intimate. I couldn't stop thinking about her outside of class, wondering about her thoughts, the way her eyes lit up when she smiled, the subtle sway of her movements. By the end of the session, I left with muscles stretched, but more importantly, my mind and heart were taut with anticipation. The playful tension had shifted from curiosity to something heavier, something charged, an unspoken question hanging between us: how far could this connection go without breaking the delicate boundaries we'd built? By the fifth session, yoga had become more than just physical exercise. The small studio, with its soft light filtering through the windows and faint aroma of essential oils, had turned into a space where connection quietly unfolded. After class, she lingered longer than usual, adjusting mats and helping another student, but always circling back toward me. This time, her attention felt different, not just corrective, but curious, personal. We began talking more casually as she rolled up her mat. "You're improving faster than I expected," she said, her tone light, but there was a warmth underlying it that made my chest tighten. I smiled, grateful, yet acutely aware of how close she stood. Our conversation shifted from yoga to life, work stresses, favorite books, and childhood memories. She listened in a way that made me feel truly seen, her head slightly tilted, eyes reflecting quiet attentiveness, lips curving into soft, encouraging smiles. Each detail, no matter how small, seemed weighted with meaning. I noticed how natural her gestures were, a gentle brush of hair from her face, a hand resting lightly on the corner of a mat as she leaned to speak to me, the subtle warmth of her proximity. Nothing was overt, yet every touch, every shared laugh, created an intimacy that extended beyond the studio. It was in the way she laughed at my awkward jokes, her eyes twinkling with something that felt like private acknowledgement, something only the two of us shared in that quiet space. Her stories revealed glimpses of vulnerability, a past challenge at work, a personal lesson learned the hard way. I found myself opening up in turn, confessing small fears and insecurities I rarely shared. The conversation flowed naturally, yet beneath the calm, there was a subtle current of tension, an awareness of the delicate line between teacher and student, between casual friendship and something more profound. When our hands brushed briefly as we passed a water bottle, a subtle jolt traveled through me. My heartbeat echoed in my chest as I caught her glance, which held a warmth and understanding that lingered long after. Even mundane gestures, a shared laugh, a moment of quiet silence, the soft exchange of a yoga strap, felt charged, as if each interaction carried an unspoken question, a tentative acknowledgement of growing connection. By the time I left the studio, the stretch of my muscles was almost secondary to the stretch of my emotions. She had become more than an instructor, she was someone who awakened awareness, someone who made ordinary moments feel extraordinary. And though neither of us spoke it aloud, the slow-burn intimacy between us had deepened, leaving me both exhilarated and quietly anxious, eager for the next session, eager to explore what this connection could mean. By the sixth session, the connection between us had grown undeniable, yet it was accompanied by a tension that neither of us could fully name. I found myself caught between anticipation and restraint, excitement and hesitation. Every glance she cast, every subtle touch while correcting a pose, sent a ripple of awareness through me. And yet, I couldn't ignore the weight of boundaries, the professional line she maintained, the age difference, the quiet knowledge that this attraction was complicated. During a challenging pose, she stepped close, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder to guide my balance. The warmth of her touch lingered longer than necessary, and I felt my chest tighten with conflicting emotions, desire mingled with hesitation, curiosity mingled with restraint. Our eyes met for a fleeting moment, and I sensed she was aware of the tension too. There was no words exchanged, but the silence spoke volumes. My heart raced, and yet my mind whispered caution. Outside the studio, I replayed our interactions over and over, analyzing every brush of skin, every look, every laugh. I was aware of how strongly I was drawn to her confidence, her calm presence, her effortless grace. At the same time, I wrestled with guilt and fear. Was it appropriate to feel this way? Was it foolish to imagine something beyond the professional connection? These questions tugged at me like invisible threads, pulling me in conflicting directions. She too seemed caught in a subtle struggle. There were moments when her laughter lingered a beat too long, when her hand brushed mine as she adjusted a pose, when her gaze softened in a way that made my pulse quicken. And yet, she always pulled back at the right moment, maintaining a careful balance between closeness and professionalism. The push and pull created a slow-burning tension, electric in its restraint, each encounter charged with unspoken possibilities. During a quiet pause in the class, she offered a small, knowing smile. I caught it and felt my resolve weaken, heart and mind battling against each other. The studio, once a place of calm and routine, now felt like a crucible of desire and restraint, each movement carrying emotional weight. I left that day both exhilarated and anxious, aware that our connection was deepening, yet uncertain how, or if, it could ever be resolved. I realized that this slow-burn attraction had become a quiet obsession, a tension I carried even outside the studio. Every session stretched me physically, yes, but emotionally, it stretched me further, making me question my own boundaries, my own feelings, and the possibility of something forbidden yet undeniably compelling. The conflict simmered, waiting for the right moment to be faced, leaving me eager, apprehensive, and undeniably aware of her presence in ways I could no longer ignore. The seventh session began with a familiar calm, yet something between us had shifted. The subtle tension that had quietly simmered over weeks was now palpable, a soft hum beneath the surface of every movement. As I entered the studio, she was already there, arranging mats with her usual grace. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the playful teasing and the lingering touches of the past weeks converged in a quiet acknowledgement. The class proceeded as usual, but this time, there was a new rhythm to our interactions. Her guidance was gentle but deliberate, every adjustment carrying a warmth that went beyond instruction. When she guided my shoulders into a stretch, her hands lingered slightly longer, and I felt the steadiness of her heartbeat beneath her touch. I met her gaze, and she returned it with a soft, knowing smile, a smile that carried understanding, patience, and something unspoken that made my chest tighten. After the poses, as the room settled into quiet stretches, I found myself sitting closer than usual, drawn to the warmth she radiated. We began talking again, this time with a new openness, sharing thoughts we had kept tucked away before. She spoke of her life with a gentle vulnerability, and I offered pieces of myself in return, not hiding the attraction I had tried to temper. The air between us was electric yet safe, filled with an unspoken agreement that this moment, this connection, mattered more than any rule or hesitation. As the session drew to a close, I felt a quiet courage rise within me. I finally spoke, my voice steady but tinged with nervousness. I admitted my admiration for her, not just for her skill, but for the way she made me feel seen, understood, and alive. There was a pause, and I held my breath. Then, she reached out, her hand brushing lightly against mine, lingering just long enough to make the world feel both infinite and contained in that small, warm contact. She responded with a soft smile and a gentle affirmation, her eyes reflecting the same emotions I had carried for weeks. There was no need for words beyond the touch, the glance, the slow, steady breathing we shared in the quiet studio. It was a moment of mutual acknowledgement, of emotional intimacy, and of respect for the boundaries we had navigated so carefully. We left the studio together that day, walking side by side. Our shoulders brushed occasionally, and each contact sent a quiet thrill through me. The connection we had built over weeks of shared effort, laughter, vulnerability, and subtle touch had solidified into something warm and enduring. The slow-burn tension had blossomed into a genuine, heartfelt bond, respectful, affectionate, and undeniably intimate. For the first time, I felt certain that this story wasn't about fleeting attraction, it was about connection, trust, and the quiet, enduring beauty of two hearts discovering one another. If you felt the slow burn between them, don't miss the full story, link in the description to watch the journey unfold.